Welcome to the Behind Beliefs and Behaviors podcast, where we take you on a journey of what is behind the specific beliefs and behaviors that impact individuals and organizations. With our guests, we get to the root cause of what stands in the way of everything from health, wealth, and relationships to leadership, community transformation, and societal progress. From topics on leadership, psychological safety, corporate culture and communication, to parenting, trauma, relationships, personal health, and intimacy, this podcast is sure to get you to the source and provide you practical tips to transform your life one root cause at a time. I am your host, Dr. Maisha Claiborne. I'm a physician, a coach, a consultant, and an expert in trauma-informed communication. The founder of the Mind Remapping Company, I help individuals and organizations better understand the brain, behavior, and the root of false beliefs so that you can more effectively listen, communicate, connect, and create fulfilling relationships and results in your personal and professional life. Join us every Monday morning at 8 a.m. and let's get to the root cause and discover what's behind your beliefs and behaviors. All right, welcome back to another episode. I am excited to talk to you all today with this colleague, brother, new fast friend of mine. We are talking about barriers to personal development and leadership. So let me just give a brief introduction, then I'm going to hand the mic over. I am talking with and happy to welcome to the show, Demetrius Kirk. You know, when you look at the title of the show, you're going to see all of the letters behind his name because he is so accomplished. But he's the owner of SMK Medical, and he's a healthcare consultant. Yeah. You know, we had a conversation a week or two ago, and we just hit it off immediately. And because you all know that I am all about psychological safety in the workplace, all about leadership development, all about making sure we create an equitable environment for our healthcare leaders, our healthcare providers, so that we can provide the best patient care. This conversation was bound to happen. So with that, I am happy. Welcome, Demetrius, to the show. How are you?
Listen, Dr. Maisha, thank you for having me. I appreciate you for taking time out of your busy day, right, to interview just lonesome of me. So thank you for having me on the podcast.
Now, you know, in our previous conversations, I told you about them words. I'm going to call you out on the air. This is not little old. This is, look at all those letters. Okay,
listen,
all those letters. So we're here to lift each other up. And I just am grateful to have this conversation with you, Demetrius. So I like the audience to get to know my guest a bit. And so would you just tell us about who you are, your journey, and how you came to start your healthcare consultant?
Yeah, thank you once again for allowing me to come on your podcast. And to your point, right, our show is Barriers to Personal Development. And I'm going to introduce myself, but I want to address what you just stated, right? Sometimes our barriers to self-development is how we identify, how we show up. Mm-hmm. And that's what you stated. Once again, I said little old me. Let's talk about the barriers to self-development, but we'll get there. My name is Demetrius Kirk, and I am a registered nurse. I hold a master's in nursing as well as a master's in business administration. But nursing and my degrees and the credentials after my name don't define me. I am a brother from Detroit, Michigan, Livernois and Davison, if you know. I'm a product of Detroit public schools and a product of a sickle cell warrior, as I like to share that story. My mom had sickle cell. So I am defined by my values, not with the letters you see behind my name. So I appreciate the opportunity to just come here and share with your audience a little bit about myself. As I mentioned, I am from Detroit, but I don't live in Detroit right now, right? I did a brave thing 3 years ago where I just uprooted my family. I said, let's go. We packed everything in 4 suitcases and we moved across the country. We moved to Honolulu, Hawaii, something I always wanted to do and something that I made happen because I believed in myself and I believed in my journey and in my destination. So I currently reside in Honolulu, Hawaii as a healthcare consultant, serving healthcare industries all across the U.S. from Hawaii back to Michigan. And, you know, my purpose here on earth is to serve and to inspire others. So if we can accomplish that during this podcast, I did a good deed for the day. So once again, thank you for allowing me to just share my story on your podcast.
I love your journey. And you gave me the behind the scenes version. And I'm going to tell you all, for what you have created,
Yes.
and the journey that you have been on to create this healthcare consulting industry
Yes.
and the impact that you're currently making. You are an amazing person. Being from Detroit, my best friend
Listen,
is from Detroit, so I'm familiar. I'm familiar
listen,
by
you
proxy, not by experience.
and so, every state has their woes, right? Detroit is definitely on the come up. It's definitely turned around. It's not what it was, right, many years ago. But I'm proud to say I'm a Detroiter. Despite things that may have happened in the city, around the city, to the city, I'm proud of where I'm from, because here's the deal: that laid the foundation. Based on what I've learned in Detroit and how I grew up, I'm thriving here in Hawaii. You can't tell me anything. I mean, I even know how to swim now.
Oh boy,
I didn't learn that in Detroit.
You went there. I love it.
But here's the deal. It gave me Detroit, growing up in Detroit, gave me the courage to do anything, right? I saw a lot of things growing up. And so when I moved here, people ask all the time, were you scared of change? And it was just like, whoa, hold on. Now I had to stand at a bus stop in the middle of the day because X, Y, and Z. So that was something to be scared about. But when I have the knowledge and the credentials I have behind myself, it's about believing in myself and knocking down those barriers to personal development. So one of the things I had to do was, first, learn to believe in myself, learn that I can do and I can achieve despite the environment that I was in or the environment I was raised in.
Yeah, there's a word for that. We call that resilience.
Ooh,
call that resilience. And it's interesting because, as you talked about, you said someone asked you, are you afraid of change? I think that if we talk about this fear of change, that's probably one of the biggest barriers to personal development. This fear of change. But what are we fearing the change of? That's the question at hand. What are we fearing the change of? And I say because I'm in the industry, even though you and we both engage consistently in our own personal development. In fact, we are the developers of people. And as like our industry, there's a barriers to growth. I'd love for you to talk about that.
When you talk about barriers of growth, there's so many things that are barriers to growth, as we talked about, being a product of your environment, which, results in, when you say the product of your environment, maybe you didn't see someone with, and I'll use us, right? A person of color in a white lab coat, right? Maybe you didn't have someone who was pushing you to go to school and gain the knowledge that you need, right? Maybe you didn't see a stable relationship, right? In your household. I mean, there's so many things that are barriers to personal development and personal leadership growth. But for me, some of the barriers that I faced was, I started the conversation was, I had a mother who had sickle cell disease. My mom taught me how to wash clothes when I was 8 over the phone from a hospital bed. Now, in that moment, and up until recently, I didn't understand how her disease impacted me and how it shaped and molded me into the leader and into the person that I am. But as I start to self-reflect, and I've done a lot of self-reflection lately, I am where I am because of my mom and because of the leadership principles and skills that she's instilled in me. When we talk about barriers, I'll use her for an example, right? Somebody with sickle cell, and she was born in the 60s, right? Told they wouldn't make it to 10, told they wouldn't make it to 18, told they wouldn't make it to 21, have kids. And for her to make it to 54 was amazing. And we talk about the barriers to professional growth and to just growth in general. It all stems here, psychological. Absolutely. And I'm sure you will echo that, right? It's all here. What we believe, what we've been told, how we perceive things, how we internalize things. So it starts with a lot of self-discovery, self-reflection. And I think that we as a society, we have a hard time with self-discovery, self-reflection, and taking criticism. Certain generations are a little easier than others, and vice versa, but we can't be allergic to receiving other people's perspective.
Right.
Ooh, we just can't.
Say that. Allergic to that. That's the quote of the day. Allergic to receiving other people's perspective. It's so true. And I think that when you have, you talked about certain generations, but I'm also going to say, I think demographically, there's also a differential, right? Because when you have a demographic of people who's used to being in power all the time,
Mm.
other people's perspectives scare them, and especially when the other people whose perspectives are being spoken, they're beginning to rise in their own power and their own brilliance and their own magic. And so it brings that fear of self-discovery. Now, this is I love that you said the fear of self-discovery.
Yes.
What I hear in the background, you haven't said it yet, is that, this fear of self-discovery, I believe, comes from a fear of what you might find, or the lack of what you might find.
Mm. and I don't know which one is worse.
Right. Right.
But, so when we talk about it, once again, we talk about the fear of what you may find or lack of what you may find. And a lot of it goes back to what's in here. Once again, we don't know how to process the findings, whether they are good or bad. So what do people do? We compartmentalize. We shove that under the sink and we say we're going to revisit it. We all got a junk drawer in our house right now that we compartmentalize. Every single person watching this podcast got a junk drawer in their kitchen right now. It's because we're going to come back to it. We don't know what we need to do with it, but we're going to come back to it. So when you talk about the fear of what we may find, it's interesting because I look at the fear of what we may find, right? I went down this rabbit hole of wanting to become a healthcare provider, wanting to become a nurse, and, move all the way up to me now working on getting my doctorate in nursing. And I remember going on this journey to get into the healthcare field, and I was ridiculed by my friends. I did the self-discovery, opened the door, and saw what I was meant to do. And the people around me, I'm 18, 19. You don't want to do that. We're getting fast money. We're doing this. Don't you see us riding around? I'm young and impressionable, right? I'm 18 in Detroit, right? I'm seeing people fast money. I mean, this is back in the day. Marauders was big. Pelly Jacqueline calling myself out. Cartier glasses, right? And these were the things that were appealing to me. But it was me, once again, back to here. I had to say, you know what? While I understand that is where I want to go and where I want to be, there's other avenues for me to get there. See, because the lifestyle they were living ends them in two places. They end up dead or either in jail.
Right.
So for me, once again, I had to be bigger than my environment and not let that distract me from what I was going to achieve, not what I was trying to achieve, because I achieved it, right? I set a goal and I achieved it.
You got me over here like, woo, bigger than your environment. You have to be bigger than your environment. And the first thing you said, too, I just love this. People don't know how to process the findings. So they compartmentalize them. They put them in the mental junk drawer. And they say they're going to come back to it. Or sometimes they just say, I'm going to put that in the mental junk drawer. And if I come back to it, maybe good. If I don't, I don't. Yes. Right? Some people put it in the junk drawer. They know that they will never open again. They're like, you know what? No, we don't need to see that. We're just going to put that in the junk drawer. That visual is so powerful. And then, when you talked about the fact that you did your self-discovery, but then you were ridiculed. So that's another barrier. When people in leadership, when they express their ideas and they're either dismissed, invalidated, or ridiculed, when they bring this self-discovery, when they become a little bit vulnerable in their what they feel are safe communities, they're ridiculed or dismissed or invalidated, then it's a shutdown.
And some of that, once again, I keep going back to your mind, right? Because some of this, for certain cultures, you're ingrained to not speak up. You're ingrained to not go against the grain.
Absolutely.
So when we have those things that we are taught as a kid, it makes it hard for us to enter the workforce and speak up when something's not right.
Yeah.
There's so many people that are working in jobs right now that it's not doing it for them. It's mentally draining. It's physically draining. It's an abusive relationship. And they don't know how to speak up. And it's something that was indoctrinated into them as a kid, is to not speak up against authority. When so-and-so says do this, this is what you do. And that becomes their personal barrier to either enhancing leadership, moving into leadership, or enhancing their life, right? They feel stuck and entrapped. And I'm sure just like you talk to leaders, you talk to people all over the world, and to us it's clear. But we have to help them to uncompartmentalize, right?
Yeah.
Because what they did is they compartmentalized.
Yeah.
So we have to help them uncompartmentalize, open that junk drawer and go through the junk to find out what we need to keep and what we need to get rid of, and then start to rebuild that foundation to give them the strength and the power needed to overcome those barriers.
Absolutely. In some cases, it is like people need to be bigger than their environment. And in some cases, people need to process whatever trauma there is that is having them be too afraid to speak up. And I think it's worth saying that there is a lot of leaders who have experienced trauma. There are a lot of people who want to be leaders who've experienced historical trauma, personal traumas that become these barriers. They become these self-talk. They become these self-beliefs. They become barriers to stepping into leadership. And so it's useful to begin to identify those voices and those beliefs and those traumas, and to begin to work with people to process those out and form the new beliefs that will actually have you step into that power and be bigger than your environment. Because when you're bigger than your environment, that's when you impact the environment. That's when you make the biggest difference.
Yes. You know what? You hit the nail on the head, right? You know, when you're bigger in your environment, you can start to make the changes. And I think sometimes for us, we're afraid to make changes because we're afraid of the riffraff. We don't know what's going to happen. We don't know how it's going to shake out. So when we talk about me moving across the country, 5,000 miles from where I was at, right? That was a leadership decision. You know, I have a family that I lead, and that was a leadership decision. And I had to stand on the decision that I made. The good or the bad that came out of it, I had to stand behind it. But what happens is people are afraid of failing. And it's okay to fail, because a fail is just the first attempt in learning. It is the first attempt in learning. So we have to fail, because how else will we learn? See, I look at this and I tell people all the time, one of the reasons that I am where I am is because I'm not afraid to fail, but I'm also not afraid to listen to others who have failing before me and take their advice. I think some generations are afraid to take advice. Me, I'm a sponge. If you say, don't touch that door, DJ, the door is hot, guess what DJ won't do? He's not going to touch it, because your hand is the scar. And I see the scar. So I don't need to have my own scar. You've told me you've taken that road, you've traveled it, and it wasn't successful. So I think where I find that a lot of people, and it's just me, my personal thing, where I think a lot of people, they have to see it, they have to touch it, and they have to feel it. And for me, that's not it. First of all, if you're in my circle, I trust you. Right? If you're in the circle, I trust you. So if I hear you say once again, DJ, don't go through that door, I'm not going to go through that door. I'm going to listen to what you're saying, because you've experienced it. You've shown the battle scars. Once again, you can't be afraid to fail. It's just the first attempt in learning. If there's something that you want to achieve or try to do, go do it. And I keep going back to why we moved to Hawaii, right? What everybody says in life is, I want to retire in Florida, Hawaii, any hot place. But they never make it to that age for several reasons. Let's name them off really quickly. Financial being one of the biggest reasons they never make it. And then followed by financial very quickly. It's health-related reasons.
Right. Yeah.
Their health prevents them, whether it is issue with hypertension, CAD, CVA, whatever. Their health prevents them from moving across the country. They have to stay where they are. They're on dialysis, diabetes, uncontrolled, right? So all those years they worked to save to get where they wanted to go, and now it's time to retire, and they don't make it. So what we did was we said, look, we're going to write our chapter early on. We're going to move here early, and if we stay, okay. But we know we can always make it in Michigan. I was there till I was 30. I can always make it in Michigan. Yeah. But what we don't know is where we're going to be 20, 30 years from now. It's not for us to say where we're going to be. We have to just ride this destination. We're on this bus. We're just going. But I can say all day, hey, I want to be here and retire in Hawaii when I'm 60. And then this pandemic called COVID comes around and wipes me out at 40, right? Yeah. So I worked hard and I didn't get anywhere. So once again, we have to overcome those barriers by just believing in ourselves.
I love that. I love that. I love this whole acronym, first attempt in learning.
Yes.
That's the first one that I've heard for fail. I really, really, really love that. And I do believe, you're just like right on point with that. Um, we are, as a culture, afraid to fail. We have a whole conversation around failure, and we put so much meaning around failure. And because of that, and also because there are some people who really have never been allowed to fail. For some people, the system is not set up for them to fail. And
Yes.
so, failure feels like death to some people. And so, it's when we start to reframe failure, when we start to reframe it as, like you said, first attempt in learning. I like to say failure is a GPS to success.
Oh,
you know
yes.
yeah, I mean, it's information. It's just
Yeah.
information. And I think that, when it comes to learning, there are some people who maybe think they've learned all they need to learn. Some people who think that they know all there is to know and they've arrived. And that's another barrier to developing oneself. Is this, I already know that. I already know. I've already done that. I've already, like the lack of a beginner's mind. And
You
I
know
think we
what?
see that so much in our industry. That is like, as I've been doing this work in multiple industries, I've done it, like in the non-healthcare and the healthcare
Mhm.
space. One of the things that, I love my colleagues. And one of the things we are just trained and conditioned to professionally develop ourselves, but not necessarily to personally develop ourselves. Now, I think that in the older, like the X generation, I think I hate to say this, but I think the boomer generation, they're
Mhm.
coming into retirement. And so, they might
Yeah.
be, it took however long it took for them to form their personality,
Yes.
unless they actively really, you know, take hold of their lives. They may just do what they do. I think the X Gen is a little bit different. We observed our parents, we
Mhm.
observed our grandparents, and we woke up and said, you know what? We don't have to live that life, but we're gonna have to grow in order to get out of that life. So there's, a percentage of X Gen that are sort of just like still sleepwalking, and then there's a percentage of X Gen that are like, no, we're not gonna take it. You know, and and then come the millennials, right? Who are the right, who are the product of the
Yeah.
we're not gonna take it.
Yes.
No,
Yes.
we ain't gonna take it. So they come out like ready to roll. So, like people like you who in that millennial generation is like, yeah, I'm just gonna up and move to
Yeah.
Hawaii. My sister, who she would call herself probably, what's the middle of the X gen and the millennial, the exennial, exennial, the micro gen. She probably called herself a micro gen exennial.
Yeah.
But she did the same thing. She graduated from Clark Atlanta University, called me one day and said, I'm moving to LA. I said, when
Wow.
you moving? She said, next month. I said, what?
Listen.
So, I mean, talk about like mindset around leadership, mindset around growth and development,
Yeah.
mindset around taking risk, mindset around vulnerability and creating safety. Like sometimes it's generational, sometimes it's demographic, sometimes it's, power and privilege.
Yeah.
And
Listen.
what we fear losing certain people, fear losing. So yeah, it's such a complex thing, these barriers, right?
And one of the things we didn't hit on, we said everything else, but one of the barriers to moving into leadership and growth, let's call a spade, is finances. Having a financial means, being born with a spoon, inheriting, whatever, right? Finances can make or break you. Your
Mhm.
access to capital is going to make and break you, right? I mean,
Mhm.
it is literally it. Sometimes we
Yeah.
can't see through the forest, right? There's so many trees in the way, right? I've been there. I've lived check to check. I know what it's like. I tell people every day, everyone's just one paycheck away from the unemployment line. I don't care who you are.
Mhm.
We're all one paycheck away from the unemployment line. And with that being said, we can't talk about a barrier to leadership development without talking about the finances, because you don't have the finances and you're worried about how you're going to pay for your medication, how you're going to pay for school, how you're going to provide for your kids, provide for, your dog, cat, family. That's a barrier to any type of growth.
Yeah.
Because that's going to lead to some anxiety, some depression, other psychosocial issues, right? And as I started this podcast, right, it all starts in here, and how we perceive and how we process emotions and what we have going on. So I think it's very important that we self-check in.
Yeah.
We do some journaling. We are not afraid to talk to people. I don't know the full demographics of your listeners, but what I do know is in certain generations and in certain cultures, we are told that we don't talk to therapists. We don't talk to, people in the medical field, right? You pray it away. You just pray it away and another check's gonna come. Well, it ain't never, it's the. So, I think that we have to be realistic that, hey, it's okay that we have these issues, these thoughts. Let's talk to somebody. Let's uncompartmentalize it, and let's achieve a plan and a goal. And I think that's what, both of us do, right? We help people strategize to be their best self. And you can only be your best self when you're open and honest with yourself and functioning in reality. That's what I do. I help people function in reality. Coulda, woulda, shoulda is a thing of the past. We coulda, woulda, shoulda. That we can't worry about the past. We have to worry about our reality. Where are we at now? Where are we trying to go? And how do we get there? But all of that is rooted in reality.
That's right. There is no point in dwelling on the past and obsessing about the future when you're in the present, and that's the gift, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So I love that. I think, when we talk about, I love that you talk about, beginning to self-reflect. And one of the things you said that really I lean into when I'm on other people's podcasts, people always ask, is there one thing that, you want to leave your audience? Community. When you said not being afraid to talk to people, that's like, yes, community. And I think it's really important to find those safe spaces that you can really authentically express, like, what is it that I'm going through? And it may be a committed listener. It may be a group of people. It may be a therapist. It may be a coach. It may be a mentor. But it's so important to find those safe places, because the world is not always a safe place. Your organization is not always a safe place. I mean, that's the work that I'm doing now, is like, how do you leaders, how do you cultivate safety, psychological and emotional safety, so that your employees can thrive in their workspaces, so that your organization may not be a safe space. Sometimes even your household may not be a safe space. So you
asking people to talk in reality, right?
That's
asking people to be real with themselves. And we talk about that's a barrier for some.
It is. And so you have to find, if it's not in your household, and that's a whole nother podcast, like, what do you do if you don't have the support in your own household to thrive and to grow? Well, you got some decisions to make, right? So that's a whole other podcast. And, you find those spaces, you find those communities that'll help you to empower, to process, to function. Like you said, what you do, help people function in reality, so that you can make the decisions that help you expand and grow and process the traumas and the harms and the hurts and the wounds that you need to process and heal, so that you can show up as your most best authentic self.
You hit the nail on the head, and that's my word, right? Nail on the head, right?
Yes.
So many people are afraid to show up as their authentic self. They are afraid to come out and be who they are. And I'm here to tell you, there's no shame in who you are. Be who you are. Be excited for who you are. Because once again, when you are hiding who you are, you're not emotionally happy. You're not there, and you're not bringing your best self to support others, because you are not truly there. So once again, it as I go back to, it all starts in here. And this is the biggest barrier to
Right.
personal development,
That's right.
how you perceive yourself,
Right.
what you believe. You know, I was doing working on a PowerPoint yesterday, and it was a PowerPoint on communication, right? And the various styles of, there needs to be a sender, receiver. We're not going to go into all of that, but ultimately, right, what I was reading in the PowerPoint that I was creating the PowerPoint is the receiver's perception, right? There are so many things that they have to filter through in your message before they interpret it, right? So we're talking back and forth, but as you hear me speaking, you have your biases, you have your experiences, you have your education, you have my body tone that you're interpreting, and then you use that to formulate how I'm saying it. So what I had to learn, my wife will tell you I'm still working on this. It's not what you say, it's how you say it.
That's right.
I had to learn that, and I'm still learning it.
That's
but
right.
You know, it's important to understand that, you know, communication, it can be a barrier to personal growth, right? So once again, if you're not being yourself, you're not being authentic, you're not really thoroughly communicating, because it's not you. You're talking, but it's not really you. As we talked about earlier, right? Code switching, right? You know, you're not yourself. You're not your authentic self. There's a time and place for things, but when I show up to a podcast, you're going to get the same laughing, joking Demetrius, whether I'm on your podcast, I'm on a national stage, because that's me. I'm authentic. I love to laugh. I love to joke. I want to see that smile you have. I want to see that smile that the audience has. I'm showing up as myself, but I think it took me a while to get there, and I got there because I self-discovered.
I love that. I love that. Listen, I think you must have like embodied, we're on the same page, because, you know, when you talked about the filters, I was like, oh, that's what I said on my TED Talk. So I was like, we're like literally on the same page. You know, I love that. I love that. One thing you said that I love is, you know, you really like, if you don't show up as your authentic self, right? But there's one thing that we have to take into account, and that's some people don't know who their authentic self is. Some people don't know who their authentic self is. So I think it's important, if you're one of those people that are saying, I really want to show up as my authentic self, but I don't know who that is, it's time to rediscover it. And it is an indication that you might need to work with someone. You know, to help you to discover. I'm working with a doc right now who's, you know, she came to me for one thing, and then it turns out like, oh, well, I need to rediscover who I am. Because I think in this industry, Demetrius, we focus so much on our craft. And we're conditioned to do that. And we focus so much on our craft, our skills, our patience. Our leaders, you know, like consulting, that sometimes we get disconnected from the core of who we are and what brings us joy and what brings us fulfillment. And so I think it's important that, you know, we come back and rediscover ourselves so that we can be our authentic self, so that we can bring our best selves, so that we can make the biggest impact possible.
You know, so I've seen the TikToks, and I always fall face forward over laughing with them, right? It starts, I'm a millennial manager. Well, I'm a millennial executive. And I subscribe to a lot of things that they said, right? Because to me, one of the most important things in life is your work-life balance, right? I've hired you because of the skills you bring, and I trust that you're going to get the job done. I don't need to know the inner workings of everything else, right? What I do know is that you shouldn't be answering emails while you're off on medical. If you're having, you told me you're going on to have a day with your husband, I don't want you responding to those emails. They will be there. The business is never burned down. Kmart is never, well, Kmart did close. Horrible example.
That's hilarious.
Walmart has never closed down because somebody missed an email, right? So you have to find that balance of truly work life. And I think what happens, to your point, is we're always trying to do our craft. We're always trying to be there for our patients, but who's there for us?
That's right.
Who's there supporting us? We have to do it for ourselves. So for me, as a millennial, executive, I am always telling my people, you have to take some time for yourself. If I'm looking at somebody and you seem stressed, I'm going to say, hey, let's close this laptop. You go home for the day. And I have said it and I have done it, because you have to worry about yourself. If you're here, you're stressed out, you're depressed, you're not focused, you're not going to be of any use to the patients. You're not going to be
right.
of any use to your team. That's how we make mistakes. And in our field, some of our mistakes can be critical. We interpret a lab wrong.
That's
we
right.
administer a wrong medication. We
That's
interpret
right.
an EKG wrong. I mean, the list goes on and on. We miss that they're allergic to this ABT, but we prescribe this. The list goes on and on. So we have to worry about our mental health. And we do understand, right? There are constraints, right? Insurance companies beating us down. We have to do this, you know. We have to meet these KPIs. But I think as leaders, we have to look at the stress we're placing on our team.
That's right.
If we're placing this undue stress on our team and we're starting to see a revolving door in key roles, we have to self-reflect. Is it something we're doing as a company and as a culture, right? And many times companies are not open to self-reflect. What they say is, oh, so-and-so they didn't work out. They wasn't cut out for it. But after the third person, is it so-and-so, or is it our style, our approach, and our culture?
Yes. Look, we got to look in the mirror, right? Like, who's the common denominator? Who's the common denominator in these problems? You know, listen, this is just, I'm gonna tell you, I already say we could go on and on and on and on. Yes. When we had our last conversation, we had such an amazing conversation. Yeah. And, you know, I know you got places to be, people to see. And, and so I just want to ask if there is, you know, I'm gonna ask you, of course, how people get in touch with you. But is there any last sort of pearl that you want to leave our listeners?
Listen, I'm on a self-discovery journey, as I mentioned. So my mom, she transitioned in 2022, and I didn't understand as I started your podcast with the impact that she had on me. And right, because it's your parents, you don't know. You think your parents are nagging, complaining, but when they're gone, or when any relationship is dissolved, you get to self-reflect on your roles in the relationship and what you took away from it. And one of the things that for me in 2024 that I'm focused on is living her motto, living life with no regrets. Because at the time you made the decision with the facts and the knowledge that you had. So you have to live life with no regrets. Once again, we can't go back to woulda, coulda, shoulda, because if you had that information and you understood it the way that you understood it post, you would have made that decision. So we have to live life with no regrets. So that's what I want to leave, right? I want your audience to live life with no regrets. And with that being said, take the caveat to not be afraid to fail, because it is just the first attempt in learning.
I love it. And I appreciate you so much for coming and having this conversation. It was, as we knew it would be, powerful.
Yes.
Right. Yeah. So sometimes, you know, you're on with certain people and it seems like you're sort of pulling teeth to right. And then sometimes you're just in the flow. And I have to admit, I feel lucky enough to primarily have wonderful guests. And I just so enjoyed our conversation. So I want you to let our listeners know how they can reach out to you if they want to experience your consulting, your coaching, if they want to follow you and listen to your podcast. Talk to us about how
I appreciate the love and the plug, because we know we need it.
Yes, sir.
And we only achieve it by collaboration such as this and promoting our synergy. So look, I am known as your healthcare consultant. It's tagged on the screen. That is my TikTok. That is my YouTube as well. Your healthcare consultant. I am a healthcare consultant specializing in risk and compliance for all things healthcare. As I mentioned, I'm a registered nurse by trade and a licensed nursing home administrator. So with that MSN and that MBA, I can do anything, right, from clinical to operations. But where I spend a lot of my time is helping people with their personal journey as an executive coach to help people reach the next level. I work with leaders who want to get into leadership, and I also see the other side of leaders who want to get out of leadership. So I help them rediscover themselves and transform themselves so they can be their best self and they can show up to their next place, whether it's work, family, wherever, as their authentic self. So I want to partner with anyone who really wants to go on this ride of self-discovery and self-journey and who's not afraid to really peel back that Band-Aid, right? You know, showing up and saying, hey, I really want to do the work. So they can follow me once again at Your Healthcare Consultant. You just type in Demetrius Kirk in LinkedIn and I'm all over the place. Podcasts, speaking engagements. Look, she dropped it all on the screen. Wow. And then I host the leadership podcast, right? Because if you can't tell, I love leadership. And I love leadership because we need people like us talking about it. talking about it from a realistic standpoint, talking about the positive and the negative of leadership. And if my podcast, which is called Sound Leadership with DJ on all social media streams, platforms, I aim to inspire, motivate, and empower you to get into leadership if that's what you want to do, but also get out of leadership if that's what you want to do. Because leadership is not for everyone, but I do encourage you to try your hand at it. You know, people say, well, I can't be a leader. And I talk to them. I say, well, tell me about your day. And they took the kids to school, took out the dog, balanced the checkbook. And I said, well, you balanced the checkbook. You the CFO of the family. You signed those permission slips and did everything else. You're the chief administration officer.
That's
so
right.
You got some leadership in you. Don't think you don't. So once again, it goes back to that mindset, right? Being told or being or not seeing it in front of them. So it's up to me and people like yourself to help bring that out of them. So once again, your healthcare consultant on all social medias. Sound Leadership with DJ is the podcast on all platforms, and follow me on LinkedIn and Twitter and everything. Right, I even got a MySpace.
Oh well, yes. Okay, MySpace. Does this still exist?
Listen. I can take it all the way back to all the old stuff, even before MySpace.
I know, right? To the yellow pages. Okay, I digress. Thank you so much, Demetrius, for coming on the show, for just talking leadership with me. I think what you do is so impactful, and you know, I really do look forward to future collaborations and with each other, you know, to help people to really grow and to help organizations grow as well. Because when we help leaders grow, that's what we do. We help organizations grow as well. So you all go check out Demetrius at Your Healthcare Consultant. You can see his website here if you're on live with us on the video. It's fmkmedical.com. You can follow him. You can actually connect with him on LinkedIn. You can connect with him on YouTube.
You see that LinkedIn handle, just so, because people don't know. My LinkedIn handle is a servant leader.
A servant leader. A servant leader. All right. That's the LinkedIn handle. And the YouTube, you can follow him on YouTube as well. That is at Sound Leadership /streams. So we're going to have all of this in the show notes too. For those who are listening on the audio podcast, we will have all of this in the show notes. And for those who are listening via YouTube, we will also put this in the description as well. So you'll be able to reach out to him if you need him. Again, Demetrius, thank you so much. We appreciate you.
Thank you for having me.
Yes. And so for all of our listeners out there, I always like to thank you. Without the listeners, there is no podcast. Please remember to subscribe so that you know when our next episode is coming out. Share this episode. Share it with a friend, share it with a colleague, share it with a family member, because people don't always recognize the leadership inside of themselves. And we need for people to know that everyone who's walking around has leadership inside of them. So share this episode, and we would so appreciate if you left a review, because guess what? We want other people to know who are coming behind you the impact that we're having on leaders, on people in our community. So make sure you share this episode, make sure you leave a review, make sure you subscribe, and guess what? I want you all to have an amazing rest of the day, an amazing rest of the week. And until our next episode, y'all stay empowered. Thank you for listening to our podcast. We know that without the listeners, there is no podcast. We hope you enjoyed this episode. Please remember to subscribe so you do not miss when we drop our next episode. And share this podcast with a friend, a family member, and a colleague, at least one person in your life today. This episode was brought to you by the Mind Remapping Company, helping organizations create psychologically and emotionally safe cultures that make their employees and leaders feel seen, heard, respected, welcome, and valued, all while fostering a thriving, engaged, and healthy workforce for the organization. Is your organization in need of a speaker? I speak about topics like psychological and emotional safety, trauma-informed communication, and employee well-being. If this is aligned with your organizational inclusion, belonging, or leadership goals, contact me, Dr. Maisha, by going to www.mindremappingacademy.com. That's Mind remappingacademy.com. Finally, we train leaders, but we also train coaches. If you're interested in becoming a trauma-informed coach, visit our website as well and check out our NLP coach trainings and certifications. We'll see you on the next episode. Until then, stay empowered.